Did you get the impression that they understood, that the clinicians in particular, but, as well as others, as well as the activists, as well as the just generally interested parties in WPATH, that they understood that these practices were experimental?
I mean, there's evidence that they are experimenting, but there's no evidence that they realize they're experimenting. I mean, there's the woman who removes the ovaries of 20-year-olds. She basically said she was experimenting. She's like, oh, I have a group of women who they don't want to be fully virilized. So we've been experimenting with micro dosing testosterone. And she's like, oh, and they all feel a lot better about themselves and everything. It's a very bizarre, like, can you even hear yourself? Their periods have stopped and they're feeling much better about themselves. It's like, well, yeah, they're on a controlled substance and you're experimenting on them. And then there's all sorts of talk. It's more they're creating the problem, first of all. So one of the most difficult parts when I was reading these files was all of the talk about the negative effect of testosterone on the female body. So, there's leaving aside the liver, there's a 16-year-old with large liver tumors, and there's talk about liver cancer, but there's also there's all these conversations about there's teenagers with vaginal atrophy, uterine atrophy, painful orgasms, they're bleeding, there's discharge, there's pelvic inflammatory disease. These are teenage girls, right? And again, we just talked about the fact that they don't know what they're giving up yet. They don't know. They've likely never had a long-term intimate relationship, and they don't understand the importance of intimacy yet. And so these doctors, first of all, they are creating the problem. It's iatrogenic. The treatment is causing the problem. And then no one knows how to deal with it because this is brand new territory. We don't have long-term studies about how you cope with all of these horrendous side effects that these young girls are dealing with. So somebody will pop up and say, oh, I saw a couple of patients and I tried this. And then someone else will show up and say, oh, well, I tried this. And it's basically just random drugs that they're trying, layering on top of the testosterone that the kids have probably already been on puberty blockers as well. And then the crucial part of those conversations is you get the trans-identified females then showing up and saying, I had that, and this is what I did. And once you've got that person, or multiple, usually, those people in there who have made that medical decision about their own body, even if this were not the cult-like ideological organization that it is, even then, the doctors would not be able to say, maybe testosterone is not so good for the female body. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is a bad idea. You can't say that in the presence of someone who has made that medical decision and is living with it, right? Like, it shuts down conversation. So no, I don't really see any sign that they acknowledge that they're experimenting. And then look at WPATH Standards of Care 8. I don't know if you read that part in the report where I talk about it's a remarkable piece of work in that they don't use the word experimental in WPATH Standards of Care 8 because experimental medicine is not covered on insurance. And the purpose of Standards of Care 8 is to get insurance coverage, nothing more. And so they'll use words like, they'll say, oh, well, future studies may show whether this is safe and effective. It means it's experimental, but they're not using the word experimental.